You must sleep with me, a man of higher spiritual power, to break the bond these spirit husbands have over you. Pastor Joshua told Kemi. His words hung in the air like a dark cloud, shattering her hope for healing. She had come to him for help, wanting to get rid of evil spiritual husbands that haunted her dreams and ruined her relationships with men, but never did she think he would say something so awful. Now, Kemi feels scared and confused. She wants love and happiness, but she's faced with a terrible choice. Can she find the courage to escape this dangerous man who pretends to be a pastor, or will she become just another victim? It's a race against time for Kemi to reclaim her life before it's too late. Kemi Adeyemi, the CEO of Lagos' most sought-after fashion brand, stood on the balcony of her penthouse, gazing out over the bustling city below. The skyline was dotted with lights from 1,000 windows, the heartbeat of the city that never seemed to sleep. Her brand, Kemi Couture, was the talk of the town, with celebrities and socialites alike donning her designs. Yet, despite all the accolades and admiration, Kemi felt an emptiness gnawing at her. Success had come at a steep cost. Her personal life was in shambles. Her phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, emails from clients, messages from her team, and invites to high-profile events. But none of that mattered as she sat there, alone. A string of failed relationships haunted her. No matter how hard she tried, love always seemed to slip through her fingers. The men she dated were either intimidated by her success or interested only in her wealth. Kemi longed for something more, genuine love, happiness, and the peace she could never seem to grasp. Kemi's mother, Mama Funmi, had always been a pillar of strength in her life. A devout Christian, Mama Funmi believed fervently in the power of prayer and spiritual intervention. For months, she had been telling Kemi that her issues weren't just physical, but spiritual. You need to visit Pastor Joshua. He's helped many women like you find happiness. It's spiritual warfare, my daughter. You must cleanse yourself. Kemi had always brushed it off, insisting that her problems were due to bad luck or simply the difficulty of balancing a career with a personal life. But as the emptiness grew, and after another heartbreak left her reeling, she found herself reconsidering her mother's advice. Perhaps there was something to this spiritual cleansing after all. Hesitantly, Kemi agreed to visit Pastor Joshua, if only to get her mother off her back. She had no idea what was waiting for her. The day Kemi finally met Pastor Joshua, she was immediately struck by his aura of authority. He was charismatic, well-spoken, and had an air of certainty that drew people to him. His church, located in the heart of Lagos, was lavishly decorated, with golden chandeliers and plush seats for the congregation. The congregation was large, filled with both the desperate and the hopeful, all seeking the pastor's divine intervention. Kemi felt out of place as she entered the grand church. She wasn't used to these environments. Though she had attended church growing up, her faith had never been particularly strong. Pastor Joshua welcomed her warmly, his eyes lingering on her for just a moment too long. "The Lord has great plans for you," he said, his voice deep and confident. "But first, we must rid you of the spiritual blockages that have been hindering your life." Kemi couldn't shake the uneasiness she felt, but with her mother's encouragement echoing in her mind, she agreed to begin the cleansing process. Kemi arrived at the church late one evening for the first cleansing ritual. The air was thick with incense, and the dimly lit room gave her an eerie feeling. Pastor Joshua stood in the center, dressed in flowing white robes, chanting softly as candles flickered around him. He explained that the process would take several sessions and that each step was necessary to rid her of spiritual husbands that were blocking her relationships. Though skeptical, Kemi found herself going along with the ritual. The pastor anointed her head with oil and whispered prayers she didn't understand. She was instructed to fast and pray for 3 days, avoiding any contact with men during that time. As she left the church that night, Kemi felt uneasy, but part of her hoped that this was the first step toward finding the peace and happiness she had been searching for. As Kemi completed the first part of the ritual, she couldn't help but question the legitimacy of what she had just experienced. The strange chanting and the eerie atmosphere had unsettled her, but she tried to push those feelings aside. "Mama believes in this, so it must work," she thought, trying to convince herself. But as the days went by, she felt no different. The emptiness inside her persisted, and she began to doubt whether these rituals were really the answer to her problems. Her mother continued to reassure her, insisting that these things took time. "You can't expect miracles overnight," Mama Funmi said over the phone. Kemi wanted to believe her, but something didn't feel right. Her business was thriving, but her personal life remained in disarray. She was no closer to finding the love and fulfillment she craved. Despite her reservations, she decided to continue with the next phase of the cleansing ritual. Little did she know, things were about to take a dangerous turn. As Kemi grew more entangled in Pastor Joshua's supposed spiritual cleansing process, the rituals began to take on a darker, more sinister tone. What had started as simple prayers and anointing sessions quickly devolved into bizarre, unnerving practices that left her questioning their legitimacy. But each time doubt crept in, Pastor Joshua's words echoed in her mind. "This is the only way to free yourself from the spirits binding you." Desperate for the love and peace she longed for, Kemi pushed her concerns aside and allowed herself to be led deeper into the rituals. One Friday night at 12 midnight when the world was quiet and still, Pastor Joshua had called Kemi, instructing her to come to a secluded part of the church compound, a place she had never seen before. There, behind the main building, was a small, rundown hut with wooden walls that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. Inside, a single candle flickered on a makeshift altar, casting eerie shadows across the room. Pastor Joshua was waiting for her, his usual serene demeanor replaced with something more intense, more fervent. In the center of the room was a large bathtub filled with dark water. The water was almost black, thickened with unknown substances. Kemi noticed strange herbs floating on the surface, leaves and stems she didn't recognize, along with something that looked like ash or burnt offerings. "This is the midnight bath," Pastor Joshua said, his voice low, almost hypnotic. "It is an ancient cleansing ritual that will wash away the impurities of the spiritual husbands who plague your dreams." He handed her a small pouch filled with powder, ground bones, he explained, though of what, Kemi didn't know. "You must strip down and bathe yourself in the water, covering every inch of your body with this powder," he continued, his eyes gleaming with fervor. "Once you are submerged, you must chant the incantations I've taught you to invite the spirits to leave." Kemi's hands shook as she took the pouch. The room was cold, and the idea of immersing herself in the thick, murky water filled her with dread. But she felt trapped. She wanted to believe that this would work, that this would finally bring her peace. As she stepped into the bath, the water clung to her skin like oil, thick and suffocating. She felt an unnatural chill run through her body, and the scent of the herbs was overpowering, almost making her gag. As Kemi began chanting the words Pastor Joshua had instructed her to say, her body grew numb, as though the water itself was leeching her strength. She felt a growing sense of unease, as if something was watching her, something unseen yet very present in the room. She closed her eyes, willing herself to get through the ritual, but a part of her knew that whatever was happening here wasn't holy. It was something else entirely. A week later, after Kemi had expressed doubts about the effectiveness of the midnight bath, she had hoped it would bring some relief, but instead, her dreams had only grown more vivid, more unsettling. "Your case is more serious than I initially thought, my dear Kemi," he began, his voice low and deliberate, as though he were about to reveal something of great spiritual significance. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. "The spirits that torment you are not just any spirits. They are spiritual husbands." Kemi furrowed her brow, unsure of what he was implying. She had heard the term before, stories of women being married to evil spirits in the spiritual realm, spirits that supposedly sabotaged their real-world relationships and success. But the way Pastor Joshua was speaking, there was something more in his tone, something unsettling. "They come to you in your dreams, don't they? They lay with you," he continued, his words dripping with false concern. "That is why you've been unable to find true love. These spirits claim you as their own, keeping you from any man who wishes to be with you." Kemi's heart began to race. It was true that she had had strange dreams before, vivid, unsettling dreams, but she had never given them much thought. Now, Pastor Joshua was weaving those dreams into something dark and sinister, trying to convince her that she was under some supernatural spell. But the way he was looking at her sent a chill down her spine. "And what am I supposed to do about this?" Kemi asked, trying to keep her voice steady. She felt the unease creeping up her neck as Pastor Joshua leaned in even closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper, as if sharing a sacred secret. "These spiritual husbands are powerful, Kemi. They will not leave you willingly. They need to be overpowered by a stronger spiritual force, someone anointed." He paused, his eyes gleaming with a twisted kind of righteousness. "That's where I come in." Kemi felt her stomach drop. She didn't like where this was going. Pastor Joshua's eyes wandered over her in a way that made her skin crawl, as if he were appraising her, not as a woman in need of spiritual guidance, but as something else, something he desired. "To undo the evil that has been done to you," he continued, his voice now heavy with manipulation, "we must conduct a final cleansing. But this cleansing is different from the others. It is physical, Kemi. You must sleep with me to sever the bond these spirits have over you." Kemi's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she thought she had misheard him. "What did you say?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. But she knew exactly what he had said. Pastor Joshua's demeanor remained calm, his face a mask of spiritual authority, as though his suggestion was perfectly natural. "These spirits have laid claim to your body in the spiritual realm. To break their hold, you must lay with someone more powerful than they are, a man of God." "Me?" Kemi's mind reeled in shock and disbelief. Her heart pounded in her chest, her hands cold and clammy. He couldn't be serious. The man who had promised to help her, to cleanse her spiritually, was now telling her that the only way to free herself from these so-called spiritual husbands was to have sex with him. It was all a lie, a grotesque manipulation designed to exploit her vulnerability. She stared at him, her mouth dry, unable to find words. Pastor Joshua leaned back in his chair, his hands steepled under his chin, watching her reaction with unsettling calmness. "You want happiness, don't you? You want love and peace? This is the only way. Trust me, Kemi. I am anointed by God to help you." Kemi felt sick. Her thoughts were racing. She had come to him seeking spiritual help, seeking peace, but now she was faced with something darker, something far more dangerous than any spiritual husband he could conjure up in his twisted narrative. She realized, with a sinking dread, that Pastor Joshua wasn't a man of God. He was a predator. She forced herself to stay composed, though every fiber of her being wanted to run out of that office and never look back. "I need time to think about this," she managed to say, her voice shaking. She knew she had to get out of there, but she couldn't risk angering him or making him suspicious. "Not yet." Pastor Joshua smiled, as if he had expected this response. "Of course, my dear. Take all the time you need. But remember, the longer you delay, the stronger the spirits become. You must act quickly if you want to break their hold on you." Kemi nodded, feeling the bile rise in her throat as she stood up. Her legs felt unsteady beneath her, but she forced herself to walk toward the door with as much calm as she could muster. Pastor Joshua's voice followed her as she left the room. "Pray on it, Kemi. And when you're ready, come back to me. I will help you." As soon as the door closed behind her, Kemi's facade crumbled. She hurried to her car, her heart pounding, her mind racing with disbelief and horror. She had trusted this man. Her mother had trusted him. But now, she knew the truth. Pastor Joshua wasn't a man of God. He was a man driven by lust and manipulation, using his position of power to prey on the vulnerable. And Kemi had almost fallen into his trap. Back in her penthouse, Kemi sat on her couch, still shaken by what had just happened. She knew she had to tell someone. The first person who came to mind was her mother, Mama Funmi, the very person who had pushed her into this situation. Kemi hesitated for hours, unsure of how her mother would react. Mama Funmi had always held Pastor Joshua in high regard, considering him a true man of God. Finally, Kemi dialed her mother's number. She tried to steady her voice as she explained the pastor's proposition. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Kemi, are you sure?" Mama Funmi's voice was soft but filled with doubt. "Pastor Joshua is a man of God. Maybe you misunderstood him. Kemi's frustration boiled over. I didn't misunderstand, Mama. He wants me to sleep with him as part of the ritual. How is that spiritual cleansing? Mama Funmi sighed deeply. Kemi, I don't know what to say. You must pray for guidance. Maybe there's another way. Kemi hung up, realizing she couldn't rely on her mother for support this time. She was on her own. The more Kemi thought about the situation, the clearer it became. She needed to sever all ties with Pastor Joshua. The problem was that he still had personal items of hers, her clothing and hair from the earlier rituals. The thought of leaving such intimate pieces in his possession made her uneasy. What if he used them against her? Kemi devised a plan to confront him and retrieve her belongings. She would return to the church, pretend to agree with his proposal, and take back what was hers before disappearing from his life for good. But the thought of facing him again filled her with dread. She couldn't shake the feeling that Pastor Joshua wouldn't let her go so easily. Her life, her peace of mind, and her future were at stake. The following day, Kemi dressed in her most confident outfit, a power suit that reminded her of who she was. She wasn't just some vulnerable woman, she was a successful CEO who had built an empire from the ground up. Walking into the church with her head held high, she was determined not to let fear control her. Pastor Joshua greeted her warmly, but Kemi saw through his facade. She played along, pretending to be interested in continuing the spiritual cleansing. I've thought about what you said, she began, forcing a smile. I think you're right. I want to go through with the ritual. Pastor Joshua's face lit up with triumph, but Kemi's heart pounded as she inched closer to retrieving her belongings. Kemi's plan worked, and as Pastor Joshua prepared for the supposed final ritual, she calmly asked to have her personal items back, claiming she wanted to anoint them herself for added power. After a slight hesitation, the pastor retrieved the items. As soon as they were in her hands, Kemi excused herself, pretending to need a moment alone. The moment she was out of his sight, Kemi bolted out of the church and into her car, her hands trembling as she gripped the steering wheel. She had gotten her things back, but her fear was still very real. Pastor Joshua was a powerful figure, and she knew exposing him wouldn't be easy. But the sense of relief at regaining control over her life was overwhelming. She had taken the first step toward freeing herself from his grip. Kemi blocked Pastor Joshua's number that very evening. She changed her phone number and cut off all communication with his church. But her mind kept returning to the other women she had seen in the congregation. How many of them were trapped in the same web of deceit and manipulation? It wasn't enough to just escape herself. She had to warn others. She began by reaching out to close friends, sharing her story. The reactions were mixed. Some were horrified, while others found it hard to believe that a man so revered could be capable of such things. But Kemi's resolve grew stronger. She wouldn't stop until Pastor Joshua was exposed for who he truly was. In the weeks that followed, Kemi returned to the church of her childhood, a small, modest congregation led by Pastor Adedeo, a man she had long respected. Though she had drifted from faith in her pursuit of success, Kemi now felt a deep desire to reconnect with her spirituality, this time on her terms. Pastor Adedeo welcomed her back with open arms, offering guidance without judgment. Through prayer and reflection, Kemi began to heal, finding strength in her renewed relationship with God. Her sense of self, once eroded by doubt and manipulation, returned with a newfound clarity. She no longer needed the approval of others to feel complete. Kemi knew that her journey wouldn't be complete until Pastor Joshua was held accountable. With the help of a lawyer and a journalist friend, she began gathering evidence of his manipulations. Other women, emboldened by Kemi's bravery, came forward with similar stories of spiritual abuse and deceit. Together, they formed a network of support, determined to expose the pastor's true intentions. The scandal that followed rocked the church community. Pastor Joshua was publicly confronted with the accusations, and though he tried to deny them, the weight of evidence was too much. His church lost many followers, and he eventually disappeared from the public eye. Kemi had not only reclaimed her life, but she had also saved others from falling into the same trap. With the chapter of Pastor Joshua behind her, Kemi's life took on a new rhythm. Her business flourished like never before, and though she was still single, she no longer felt incomplete. The love she had been searching for had always been within her, waiting to be discovered. She now understood that true fulfillment came from living authentically and with faith. Kemi began speaking at women's conferences, sharing her story of survival and spiritual empowerment. She became a voice for those who had been silenced, and her message was clear: no one should ever be manipulated in the name of faith. Through her journey, she had learned that true faith is rooted in love, strength, and the courage to reclaim your destiny. Years later, Kemi would reflect on this dark chapter of her life with gratitude. It had taught her to trust herself, to lean on her inner strength, and to never place her destiny in the hands of another. She had come out of the storm stronger, wiser, and more at peace than ever before. Kemi no longer sought validation from others, because she had finally found it within herself. Her journey wasn't about finding love or success, but about finding herself, and in doing so, she discovered that true happiness comes from within. Though her path had been difficult, it led her to the one thing she had been searching for all along: peace. If you enjoyed this story, please drop a heart emoji, comment, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also turn on post notification to get updates when we post a new video like this. Thanks for watching.